A desperate horn call echoes across the Silverwood. High King Elian knows the creeping Shadowvale blight threatens all life, and only a united front of ancient peoples can turn back the tide. By the end of this story, you will witness the forging of the legendary Last Alliance, a bond of friendship that saved a world. What secret strength could possibly unite proud elves, isolated humans, grudge-holding dwarves, and the reclusive forest folk? And wherever you are listening from right now, in the quiet of your evening or the calm of your afternoon, feel free to share your peaceful corner of the world with us. This tale begins with a single, risky decision, one that gambles a kingdom's safety on the fragile memory of old alliances. What does it truly take to rebuild trust when the world is falling apart? King Elian's path now led him from the deep woods to the vast, sun-drenched plains of Loria. Golden fields of grain stretched to the horizon, a testament to the human kingdom's strength and self-sufficiency. He did not arrive at Queen Lyra's court with an army at his back or a list of demands. He came alone, his only offering a story. He spoke not of the current troubles, but of a time long past, when elf and human stood shoulder to shoulder beneath the same banners, their combined voices singing songs of creation that shaped the very hills they now stood upon. He reminded her of a shared legacy of glory, a memory that had faded but not been forgotten. Queen Lyra, a ruler famed for her fierce protection of Loria's borders and its independence, listened in silence. Her gaze, however, drifted from the eloquent elf king to the window, to her own lands. She saw the subtle signs others missed, the creeping blight at the edges of her most fertile fields, the way the sun seemed to struggle through a gathering haze. Her pride demanded isolation, but her eyes could not deny the truth of the slow decay lapping at her doorstep. The choice was a pivot upon which the world would turn. With a resolve that would be sung of for ages, she chose to remember their old friendship. She pledged her finest riders, the swift and brave Lorian cavalry, to the cause. This was the first, fragile thread of the alliance, spun from memory and necessity. Yet the mountains of the dwarves loomed in the distance, shrouded in mist and ancient grudges, and their agreement would be far harder to win. The air grew thin and sharp as the path coiled upwards into the clouds. Elian and his small delegation left the golden plains behind, climbing towards the dwarven citadel of Stone Peak, a fortress carved not from the mountain, but directly into its granite heart. Where the human court valued stories, the dwarven kingdom valued strength, and the grudge their king held was as ancient and unyielding as the stone around them. King Boren stone, and received them not in a throne room, but in the vast forge hall, the air ringing with hammers and the scent of hot metal. He was a mountain of a dwarf, his beard braided with iron, and his gaze could have chilled lava. "You speak of alliances, Elf King," he rumbled, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "But my people remember the last time we trusted elven words. They were fair and fleeting, like morning mist, while our kin faced hardship on distant fields. Your commitment must be proven in a language we understand." Strength and stone-clear wit, he challenged Elian to a trial, a test that seemed designed for him to fail. A massive, flawed gear mechanism for the Citadel's Great Gate had defeated the finest dwarven engineers for a generation, its constant shuddering threatening to shake the very gatehouse apart. Boren gestured to the monstrous assembly of iron and stone. "Show me your famed elven magic. Stop its trembling." Lorian did not call upon any enchantment. He approached the groaning mechanism not as a king, but as a student of form and force. He observed the stress points, the uneven wear on the great teeth of the gears. He saw not a magical problem, but an engineering one. Instead of trying to overpower the flaw with strength, he proposed a clever redistribution of weight, suggesting a counterbalance system using the mountain's own natural water flow from a higher aquifer. It was a solution of profound simplicity and respect for the dwarves' own craft. Using the environment they revered, the great gear settled into a smooth, silent, powerful rotation. The hall fell utterly quiet, save for the new, gentle hum of perfect function. Boren's stern expression did not soften into a smile, but a flicker of something new, something akin to respect, ignited in his eyes. The pledge of the Dwarven legions was given, their axes and shields now part of the growing alliance. Yet Boren's trust remained as hard as the stone he ruled, a conditional gift that could be withdrawn as swiftly as it was given. With this hard-won pact secured, the path now led deeper into the unknown, towards the whispering, ancient woods where a people of even more mysterious ways waited, their allegiance a secret locked deep within the roots of the world itself. The Whispering Woods lived up to their name, a place where the very air seemed to speak in rustling sighs, and the dappled light held ancient secrets. Lorian sent his most empathetic captain, a silver-haired elf named Anya, to lead the envoys into this sentient realm. They entered not as conquerors, but as petitioners, their steps careful and their hearts open. The Sylvan folk, beings woven from leaf and shadow, watched from the deep green, their presence felt more than seen. The true test came not from the elders, but from the forest's own heart. A great guardian spirit, a being of pure life force, had been touched by the Shadow Vale's influence. It was not a monster to be fought, but a force of nature in distress, its turmoil causing the trees to weep and the very ground to tremble. The challenge was to calm this turmoil without raising a single weapon. Anya understood this was a trial of harmony, not strength. For a full day and night, her company did nothing but endure. They stood firm against the spirit's wailing winds, their own fear held in check by a profound patience. They did not command the spirit to be still. They simply refused to add their own conflict to its struggle. Then, Anya made a choice that echoed with a quiet, stunning finality. From a pouch at her side, she drew a radiant elven light orb, a treasure of her people that held a captured fragment of starlight. It was a piece of her home, a comfort in the dark, a symbol of elven magic. Without hesitation, she offered it not as a weapon, but as a gift. She stepped towards the tormented spirit and released the orb, letting its pure, gentle light wash over the troubled form. The orb shattered, its light expended in a single, cleansing wave. The spirit's turmoil did not vanish in an explosion, but softened into a sigh of relief, the forest around it falling into a profound, grateful silence. From the shadows, the Sylvan elders emerged. They had witnessed an act of true respect, a sacrifice made for the sake of life itself, not for victory. Their ancient magic, the power to guide roots and speak to the wind, was now pledged to the Alliance. The fledgling army was complete, a tapestry of elf, human, dwarf, and Sylvan, woven together by trust, tested in fire, stone, and leaf. They turned as one, their gaze set upon the vast, open plains where the Shadowvale's main host was gathering. Their first true test, a challenge not for a single grove or mountain, but for the fate of the world itself, was about to begin. The first true scent of the Shadowvale was a dry, bitter rot on the wind. The allied army stood arrayed at the mouth of Sunken Pass, a narrow defile where the high cliffs seemed to swallow the sky. Before them, the enemy vanguard seethed, a tide of thorny, twisted forms that moved with a chilling, unnatural unity. They were not mindless beasts, but a corrupted mockery of life, their advance silent and utterly relentless. The Dwarven shield wall, a masterpiece of interlocking steel, held the center, their booming war cries a stark contrast to the enemy's eerie quiet. Elven arrows fell like silver rain from the cliffs above, each shot precise, yet the throng seemed endless. It was a brutal, grinding stalemate, and with every moment, the line threatened to buckle under the sheer, suffocating pressure. Queen Lyra watched from her saddle, her heart a drum against her ribs. A direct charge into the pass was a hopeless endeavor, a funnel of certain loss, yet to hold the line was to be slowly worn away to nothing. Her gaze swept the treacherous, crumbling slopes to the east, a route marked on no sane map. It was a gambler's path, a desperate chance to strike the enemy flank where they felt most secure, to order her riders, the pride of Eloria, onto that unstable ground, was to risk losing them all to a landslide before a single sword was drawn. But the alternative was the end of everything, here and now. Her choice was a whisper that became a roar. Lorian cavalry, to the high ground. The order echoed, not with triumph, but with the grim weight of a necessary choice. What followed was a nightmare of sliding shale and panicked horses. Riders and their mounts fought for every hoofhold on the sheer slope, the sounds of the battle below mingling with the terrifying rumble of dislodged stone. Some did not complete the journey, their absence a sharp, silent pain carried by those who pressed on, but those who reached the vantage point saw their moment. As the Dwarven line gave a final, shuddering groan, Lyra's silver horn sounded a single, clear note from above. The Lorian cavalry descended not as a wave, but as a spear, a focused, devastating point, driven straight into the heart of the Shadowvale host. The impact was catastrophic for both sides. Lances shattered on thorny hides, and the cost was felt in the stillness of those who fell. Yet the enemy line, so rigid and assured, splintered. The pressure on the Dwarven front eased, and the tide of battle turned. That night, there were no grand victory celebrations. The air was thick with shared remembrance. Dwarven hands, more accustomed to gripping axe hafts, helped prepare final resting places for the human riders. Elven healers moved among the wounded of all races, their magic a gentle light in the overwhelming dark. The bond forged in that pass was not one of glory, but of profound, unspoken respect. They had looked into the same abyss together, but as the campfires flickered, a new, colder fear began to stir. The enemy fallen did not linger. They crumbled into dust and shadow, leaving no trace behind, a disquieting end that felt less like a defeat and more like a withdrawal. And from the lips of a dying scout who had ventured too far into the blighted lands came a final, chilling warning. He spoke of a whisper on the wind, a voice that promised rest and an end to struggle, a soothing lie that sought to unravel the very will of those who heard it. The real challenge, it seemed, was only just beginning, and its next front would not be a field of war, but the quiet, vulnerable landscape of the mine. A strange exhaustion settled over the camp like a heavy fog, but it clung only to the Dwarven ranks. Their vibrant energy, so vital during the battle, seemed to drain away into the earth itself, leaving them listless and weak. King Boren's frustration boiled over into a thunderous rage. He stormed into the central command tent, his face a mask of granite fury, and pointed a thick finger toward the Sylvan elders. "This is no natural illness," he roared, his voice shaking the canvas walls. "It is their doing. Their forest magic turns against us. They have broken our pact." The alliance, so newly forged, teetered on the edge of splintering. Accusations hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Aloud stepped between them, his own heart heavy. He did not dismiss Boren's fears, nor did he chastise the Sylvan folk. He asked only for a chance to seek the truth. The search led him away from the tents and the heated words, to the small, swift stream that provided the camp's fresh water. To any eye, it appeared clean and pure, but to Aloud's heightened senses, something was wrong. He knelt, dipping his fingers into the cold current, and felt it. A subtle, shadowy resonance clung to the water, a magic so faint it was like a single discordant note in a grand symphony, a deliberate taint meant to sow discord and weaken the strongest among them. He traced the magic upstream to its source, a place where a gnarled, blighted root had pierced the bank, weeping its invisible influence directly into the current. This was no act of the Sylvan folk. It was a calculated strike from their true enemy, an attack aimed not at their bodies, but at the very trust that bound them. When Aloud presented his findings, the truth was a humbling blow. King Boren, a dwarf who valued honor above all, stood before the gathered leaders, his pride warring with a deeper understanding. He did not make excuses. He looked the Sylvan elders in the eye and offered a simple, profound apology. "My anger was a weapon I turned upon my own allies," he stated, his voice low but clear. "Forgive my blindness." The act of apology, far from weakening him, forged a new kind of strength between their peoples. They had faced a shadow from within and dispelled it together. Yet the narrow escape left them all with a chilling realization. Their enemy was not a mindless force of destruction. It was a cunning intelligence that understood their weaknesses better than they did themselves, and its next move was already unfolding in the silence. The silence in the war tent was heavier than any dwarf-forged armor. Under a canopy of cold, distant stars, the four leaders stood around a map etched into stretched hide, the flickering lantern light making the painted threats seem to writhe. The latest scout reports lay between them like accusations. The Shadow Vale was not just testing their borders anymore. Its main force, a host of such immense size it darkened the land, was massing for a single, overwhelming strike. Aloud's finger traced a path on the map away from that gathering storm, towards a solitary, ancient marker far to the north. "The Monolith of Ethel," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "It is a conduit of the world's oldest energies. If the Shadow Vale claims it, its power will become an unstoppable weapon. We cannot meet their main force head-on, not yet. We must divide our strength. A small, swift force will ride to secure the monolith. The rest will prepare our defenses here." Queen Lyra's hand came down flat on the table. You would split us now, when our only hope lies in unity. You ask us to weaken this army on the eve of its greatest trial for a relic. It is a gamble with our very survival. Her words hung in the air, charged with the fear of every soldier in the camp. The tension was a physical thing, threatening to tear their hard-won alliance apart at the seams. Then, a low, rumbling voice cut through the silence. King Boren, his arms crossed over his broad chest, had been studying the map with a stone carver's intensity. He looked from Elian's determined face to Lyra's furious one. The Elf King sees the whole mountain, not just the tunnel in front of him, Boren stated. His people do not think in seasons, but in ages. I understand this kind of thinking. In the deep mines, when a support beam is about to fail and bring the whole cavern down on your head, you do not just hold it. Sometimes, you must let a single chamber fall to save the rest of the mine. You risk a finger to save the hand. His simple, powerful analogy, born from a life of hard choices underground, settled the debate more effectively than any royal decree. Lyra, though her expression remained stormy, gave a sharp, reluctant nod. The plan was set. As the council broke and the leaders moved to their people, the camp began to shift with a new, divided purpose. Elian would lead a small, elite group on the desperate race north. The main army, under Lyra and Boren's joint command, would dig in and prepare to face a shadow that stretched to the horizon. There was no grand farewell, only a quiet, sober understanding as the two forces parted ways at first light, each carrying the fragile hopes of the whole world on their shoulders. The salt flats were a cracked white sea under a relentless sun, a place where hope seemed to evaporate like water. Elian's small company of elven scouts and Lorian riders pushed their mounts across the shimmering expanse, a desperate dash against an unseen clock. The air itself played tricks on them. Phantom towers of enemy fortresses rose in the distance only to dissolve into heat haze. Whispers coiled up from the salt, not in any language, but in the raw, painful memory of a lost home, a fallen comrade, a promise broken. It was a spiritual poison, designed to unravel their resolve from the inside. One of the human riders, a young woman named Kaelin, suddenly reined in her lathered horse, her eyes wide with a private terror. "They are in the grain silos back home," she gasped, pointing at nothing. "We have to go back." The company faltered, their unity fraying under the assault. Elian knew no sword could block this. He brought his own horse to a halt and simply closed his eyes. He did not summon a blinding flash of power. Instead, he reached for the quiet, steady light of his own spirit, the same inner resilience that had guided him through doubt and diplomacy. A soft, silver-white radiance began to emanate from him, not a fire to push back the dark, but a gentle beacon of clarity in the midst of confusion. It was a profound act of sharing his own strength, and it came at a great personal cost. The riders, their minds clouded with fear, felt the mirage's grip loosen as they focused on that unwavering light. It was a lifeline thrown into a storm of the soul. Kaelin blinked, the phantom images of her home fading, her gaze clearing as she looked at her king. They pressed on, their pace renewed by a deeper trust, and crested the final rise to see it. The Monolith of Ethel stood stark and solitary against the sky, a pillar of ancient, warm stone, humming with a low, comforting energy. They had won the race. Elian's company secured the site, their elven senses confirming the place was clean, their human eyes scanning the horizon. They saw the distant, fleeting shapes of enemy scouts, turning away, thwarted. A wave of hard-earned relief washed over them. They had safeguarded one of the world's great anchors, but that relief was a fleeting gift. As they celebrated their small, crucial victory, a lone elven messenger, his horse near collapse, thundered into their camp. He brought word from the south, and his face was etched with a grim truth. The assault on the Monolith had been a feint, a clever distraction. While Aelian's force was drawn north, the Shadowvale's true and overwhelming army had begun its march, not towards a fortified position, but towards the undefended heart of the elven homeland itself. The first war horns from the high watchtowers did not signal a skirmish, but a cataclysm. The Shadowvale host, a living tide of shadow and thorn, crashed against the mountain slopes of Stone Peak with a force that shook the very foundations of the Dwarven realm. This was no probing attack. It was a full-scale siege aimed at erasing the Alliance's greatest bastion of strength. From a command balcony carved into the mountainside, King Boren watched the lower defenses vanish beneath the onslaught, his hands gripping the stone rail until his knuckles were white. The enemy commander, a being known only as the Corruptor, was a visible void at the heart of the storm. Its presence, a chilling intelligence that directed the assault with surgical precision. The outer gates, mighty constructs of iron and oak, groaned under a relentless, focused battering. Boren's captains shouted reports of tunnels being overrun, of brave shield lines buckling in the lower halls. The stark reality of the situation became terrifyingly clear. To commit all their reserves to save the outer defenses was to risk the entire citadel, to lose every soul within its heart. The only path to survival was a sacrifice that would stay with him for the rest of his days. His order was a low, graveled word, torn from the depths of his being. Seal the mountain. Great counterweight systems, dormant for centuries, groaned into motion. With a final, earth-shaking roar, the massive inner gates of Stone Peak slammed shut, a wall of solid granite now separating the upper citadel from the lower halls. The thunderous finality of that sound was louder than any enemy war cry. In the sudden, heavy silence that followed, Boren could hear the faint, fading sounds of the battle they had just left behind, the last stands of his own people. He had saved the kingdom by severing a part of its own body. What is a king, if not the one who carries the weight of such choices, so his people do not have to? The siege settled into a grim rhythm. The dwarves, their resolve hardened by what had passed, and their king's unwavering presence, became the mountain itself. They met every scaled assault with a storm of crossbow fire and boiling oil. They fought in shifts, sleeping in their armor next to the barricades, their endurance a legend being written in real time. They were not just defending stone, they were defending the memory of those who came before, and that made them unyielding. Yet, with every passing day, their supplies of food and bolts dwindled. The fate of the last alliance, and of all the free peoples, now rested on the speed and strength of the relief force marching towards them, a distant hope in a darkening world. The news of Stone Peak's desperate stand reached Queen Lyra's camp like a heavy blow. There was no time for grand strategy, only for swift and decisive action. She gave the order that would test the very spirit of her army, a forced march through the scarred highlands. This was no road, but a broken landscape of jagged rock and deep ravines, where the air carried the scent of ash, and the ground seemed to cling to their boots with shadowy roots. Exhaustion became a constant companion, a weight that grew heavier with every league. It was here, in this crucible of shared hardship, that Queen Lyra made her most powerful command decision. She stepped down from her horse and walked. She moved through the ranks not as a distant monarch, but as a fellow soldier, her own weariness plain for all to see. When the last of the clean water was rationed, she took her share last. When a young dwarven soldier stumbled, it was her hand that steadied him. She did not command their loyalty from a throne. She earned it with every painful step she took beside them. The sight of their queen sharing their burden did more to strengthen their resolve than any speech ever could. The rigid lines that once separated elf from human, dwarf from Sylvan, began to blur and then dissolve entirely. A Lorian soldier would offer a waterskin to an elven archer whose voice was too hoarse to sing. A dwarven warrior, his own legs burning, would carry the pack of a weary Sylvan scout. They were no longer four armies marching together, but one people bound by a single, urgent purpose. They pushed beyond the limits of flesh and spirit, driven by the knowledge that every moment of their hardship was a moment bought for their friends under the mountain. They crested the final ridge as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the sight that greeted them was one of both hope and dread. The great citadel of Stone Peak still stood, but the slopes below it swarmed with the enemy. From the highest towers, a single, defiant dwarven banner flew, yet even from this distance, they could see the main gate shaking under a final, massive assault. They had arrived not a moment too soon, at the very edge of a fall. The river of echoes ran dark with the enemy's presence, a heavy current that seemed to drain the life from the land. Queen Lyra did not give the order to charge. She gave it to hold. The allied army formed a single, unbreakable line along the riverbank, a wall of shields and spears and silent determination. Their arrival had drawn the besieging force away from the gates, but now they faced the full, monstrous tide, turning to meet them. The fighting was a difficult, close-quarters struggle for every inch of ground. Elven grace met brute force, dwarven strength met endless numbers, and the line began to bend under the crushing weight. In the heart of this chaos, a desperate plan was born. The Sylvan elders saw the river not as a barrier, but as a conduit. Their ancient magic could guide and purify, but it needed a catalyst, a surge of raw power to ignite a cleansing fire. They turned to the dwarves and their great fire pots, clay vessels filled with volatile oils that burned with a fierce, stubborn heat. The proposal was a terrifying gamble. To combine the wild, living essence of Sylvan magic with the controlled, focused energy of dwarven craft required a trust deeper than any treaty. A single misstep, a flicker of doubt from either side, and the resulting release would consume their own front lines. There was no time for debate, only for a look of grim understanding that passed between the elders and the lead dwarf engineer. As the enemy pressed its advantage, the dwarven crews rolled their heavy pots to the river's edge. The Sylvan folk did not chant or summon. They simply reached out with their will, their hands open to the water, their song a silent plea to the spirit of the river itself. The fire pots were lit and cast into the darkened flow. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, the river did not catch fire. It ignited. A wave of pure, White light erupted from the water, a blazing, liquid sunrise that raced across the surface. It was not a flame that burned, but one that cleansed, scouring the shadow from the water and washing over the enemy ranks. The Thorn soldiers did not scream, they simply dissolved, their forms unwound by the radiant energy. The Shadowvale line shattered into fleeing, disordered fragments. The sight of the river blazing with light was so stunning, so fundamentally opposed to the blight, that the enemy's will to fight broke entirely. A great cheer went up from the weary defenders on the walls of Stone Peak, a sound of hope reborn. As the last of the light faded from the water, leaving it clear and flowing once more, the cost of that hope became visible. The banks of the river were scorched, the earth itself bearing the memory of the purifying fire. Among the allies, those who had fallen were gently carried from the field, their memory a quiet testament to the price of the turning tide. The Shadowvale was in retreat, but the silence they left behind was not one of peace, but of a world holding its breath, waiting for the next and perhaps final move in this ancient conflict. The great hall of Stone Peak felt different. Its familiar granite arches, once echoing with booming laughter and the clang of hammers, now held a profound and somber quiet. The air was thick with the scent of healing herbs and the low murmur of shared remembrance. Leaders and soldiers of all peoples moved among those who needed care, their hands gentle, their faces etched with the memory of the river of light and the cost it had asked of them. There were no grand speeches of victory, only the quiet, necessary work of tending to those who had given so much. It was in this hallowed space that High King Elian made a decision that would echo far beyond the mended stone. He approached King Boren, not with a proposal from one monarch to another, but as one who had shared in the experience. He asked that the Great Gate, the very symbol of the Citadel's sacrifice, be rebuilt not by Dwarven hands alone, but by a fellowship of artisans from every people. Elvenstone singers would lend their knowledge of ancient harmonies to strengthen the foundations. Human crafters would weave their resilient ironwood into the new framework. Sylvan weavers would bless the stone with growth spells, ensuring that living vines, symbols of resilience, would one day embrace the gate, and the dwarves, the masters of the mountain, would guide the work, their hammers setting the rhythm for this new shared creation. The act was a quiet revolution. As they worked side by side, smoothing stone and singing old songs in new harmonies, the alliance ceased to be a pact of necessity. It became a brotherhood, its bonds forged not just in battle, but in the patient, shared labor of healing a broken thing. They were no longer four people standing together. They were one people, united by a single will, and that will now had to turn from defense to a final, desperate question. How do you confront a shadow that feeds on despair itself, an adversary that has no heart to strike and no fortress to besiege? Deep in the stone heart of the citadel, a forgotten archive yielded its secret. It was not a weapon, but a prophecy, written in a language of light upon a crystal slate, older than any kingdom. The words spoke of the first dawn, a time when the world's light was new and pure, and of a shadow that was cast in that same moment of creation. The text revealed a profound symmetry. The Shadowvale could only be unmade where it was born, at a place named the Heart of Shadow, and only during the celestial alignment of the twin moons, when the veil between light and dark was at its thinnest. This was not a hopeful legend. It was a countdown, a single, narrow window of opportunity, that would not open again for 1,000 years. The revelation settled over the War Council like a physical weight, drawing the air from the room. They had just won a great victory, and now they were being told that victory was only a temporary reprieve. To end the war, they would have to leave their hard-won defenses and journey directly into the core of the enemy's strength, to the most fortified and shadowed place in all the world, and do so before the moons met in the sky. The silence that followed was broken by the quiet, firm voice of a young Sylvan scout. "So we do not have a choice," she said. "We only have a direction." The decision to risk everything, the entire hope of every free people, on one determined strike, now hung in the air, a shared burden that demanded a plan born not of courage alone, but of a deep and collective understanding of what was at stake. The Deadlands stretched before them, a colorless expanse under a sky the hue of burnt ash. Here, the air was thin and carried a dry, metallic taste, and the ground crumbled underfoot like ancient stone. Silence was the land's true ruler, a heavy, quiet stillness, broken only by the wind and the crunch of their own footsteps. It was a place where hope felt like a distant memory, and with every mile, the army's collective spirit grew heavier, weighed down by the sheer, oppressive emptiness. Queen Lyra saw the slump in her rider's shoulders, the way even the elves' luminous eyes seemed to dim. She knew they were marching not just across a broken land, but through a landscape designed to test their will. So, she did not command them to be hopeful. She gave them a song. It started softly, a simple marching tune from the golden fields of Eloria, a melody of harvest and home. One by one, the human soldiers took it up, their voices rough at first, then growing stronger as the familiar rhythm filled the void. Soon, the elves wove their own harmonies into the chorus, ethereal and high, turning the work song into something hauntingly beautiful. The dwarves, who did not sing lightly, began to beat their axe halves against their shields in a steady, thunderous tempo, a heartbeat for the marching column. These singing marches became a daily act of defiance, a wall of sound they built against the silence. When the songs were not enough, King Boren would gather the weary around the evening's meager campfires. He did not speak of grand victories or kingship. He told stories of the deep mines, of challenges and lost passages, of generations of dwarves who had faced uncertainty with nothing but stubborn endurance and the trust in the dwarf beside them. His tales were not epic. They were practical lessons in resilience, reminding them all that the longest journey is overcome one stubborn step at a time. Their progress was slow, the land itself seeming to shift against them. What looked like solid ground would give way to pits of fine, choking dust. Strange, crystalline formations jutted from the earth, humming with a dissonant energy that set teeth on edge. They lost supplies to sudden fissures and precious time, navigating fields of razor-sharp shale. Yet, with every new obstacle, the leaders were there, not ahead on horseback, but in the thick of the struggle, sharing the hardship and reinforcing the bonds that the Deadlands sought to wear away. Each day was a challenge not against an enemy, but against despair itself, and each evening they made camp was a small, hard-won victory, their resolve strengthened like steel in a forge as they drew closer to the shadowed heart of their world. The first whispers came not as a sound, but as a sudden, sharp memory. A soldier on watch swore he saw his lost brother standing just beyond the firelight, beckoning him home. Another heard the comforting voice of a parent promising safety, If they would only lay down their weapons and rest. The Corruptor's assault had begun, and its battlefield was the mind. These were not mere phantoms. They were perfect, agonizing reflections of the heart's deepest longing, tailored to each individual's private sorrow. In the command tent, Lorian saw his own vision. It was the Silverwood as it had been in his youth, untouched by shadow, a sanctuary of pure, singing light where his people lived without fear or conflict. The promise was seductive, a future where his duty was done and his kingdom was forever safe. To turn from it felt like a betrayal of everything he had ever fought for. He could feel the temptation to step into that perfect dream, to let its peace wash over him and end his long struggle. But he also saw the subtle flaw in the illusion, the way the light did not cast the right shadows, the way the familiar songs of the woods were just a half note out of tune. This was not a gift, it was a cage. The enemy sought to unravel them not with force, but with the very hope they fought to protect. Drawing upon the sunstone's steady warmth, Lorian did not lash out with its power. Instead, he let its light fill him, a quiet, internal dawn that burned away the false images clouding his own mind. He then walked out among his people, his presence a calm anchor in the storm of their collective grief. He did not tell them their longings were false. He acknowledged their pain, their exhaustion, the powerful allure of the lie, but he reminded them of the truth they were building together, a real peace earned through shared sacrifice, not a phantom one offered as a trap. With a final, gentle release of the sunstone's energy, he sent a wave of clear, resonant light through the camp. The whispering illusions flickered and dissolved like mist in the morning sun, leaving behind the stark, real world they had to save. The psychological attack had failed, but its revelation was chilling. The Corruptor was growing desperate, using such intimate deceptions because it feared their progress. The final leg of their journey into the heart of shadow would now be the most perilous, a path where every step would be haunted by the echoes of what they had almost lost. The path ended not at a wall, but at an absence. The chasm of lost hope gaped before them, a deep scar in the world whose bottom was lost to a swirling, silent mist that seemed to drink the light itself. No rope could span it, no ramp could be built. The very air above the rift crackled with a disruptive energy that would tear any physical structure apart. A profound silence fell over the army as the scale of the obstacle became clear. They had journeyed so far, weathered so much, only to be halted at the final threshold. It was then that the eldest of the Sylvan folk stepped forward, her form seeming to blend with the bleak landscape. She did not look at the chasm, but at the four leaders. "There is a way," she said, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "but the bridge we need is not made of stone or wood. It must be woven from light itself, from the unique essence of each of our peoples. And you four must be the anchors." The risk was absolute. To channel their collective magic in such a pure, unguarded form would mean opening their spirits completely, becoming conduits for a power that required perfect harmony. A single note of discord, a flicker of mistrust or doubt from any one of them, and the energy would recoil, leaving their minds fragmented and the army stranded. They would be utterly vulnerable, their inner selves laid open to one another. It was the ultimate test of their alliance, a demand for trust that went beyond treaties and into the core of their being. There were no words of debate, only a slow, shared realization of what was required. Elian, Lyra, Boren, and the Sylvan elder moved to the very edge of the precipice. They did not look at each other, but inward, and then outward, towards the hope they all carried. Elian called upon the ancient, starlit grace of the elves, a silver light that flowed from him like a calm river. Lyra summoned the fierce, enduring spirit of her people, a warm, golden radiance that spoke of hearths and harvests. Boren reached for the unyielding strength of the mountain, a deep, earthy brown energy that was as solid as granite. And the Sylvan elder drew upon the whispering, growing life of the forest, a vibrant green light that pulsed with the heartbeat of the world. For a terrifying moment, the four energies swirled independently, repelling each other on the verge of a catastrophic collapse. But then, guided by the shared memory of the River of Light, the commitment at Stone Peak, and the long, hard road they had walked together, they let go. They stopped trying to control their power and instead allowed it to blend. The silver light wove through the gold, the earthy strength braided with the vibrant green, creating a single, brilliant cord of intertwined energy that stretched out over the abyss. It solidified into a bridge of breathtaking beauty, a permanent rainbow arched over the emptiness below, each color representing a people, yet all one structure. The army crossed in a hushed awe, their footsteps silent on the luminous path. On the other side, they turned to watch as the leaders slowly released their focus, the bridge fading gently away. No one spoke. The act had proven something more powerful than any battle won. Their unity was not just a strategy, it was a tangible, world-altering force. And as they turned to face the final, dark fortress that now loomed before them, they did so not as an alliance of four, but as one people, forged in a light that no shadow could extinguish. The Obsidian gates rose before them like a wall of frozen midnight, humming with a low, unsettling rhythm that echoed in their bones. This was the heart of shadow, and the time for subtlety had passed. At King Boren's roared command, the great Dwarven siege engines, masterpieces of leveraged force and stubborn engineering, lurched forward. Massive stone projectiles, hewn from the heart of their own mountain, slammed into the dark surface with a sound like a world cracking open. Each impact sent spider webs of violet light skittering across the gate, but the ancient obsidian held, absorbing the punishment. While the dwarves worked their relentless, percussive magic, the air above became a storm of elven arrows. They flew not in wild volleys, but as precise, silver streaks, each one finding its mark in the joint of a thorned armor plate or the eye of a shambling guardian. They created a protective zone, a deadly umbrella under which the dwarves could labor, and when swarms of shadowy defenders attempted to flank the siege lines, the Lorian cavalry answered. Queen Lyra's riders were a whirlwind of focused motion, a swift and decisive counter that met each emerging threat with lances and swords, their charge and retreat a perfectly timed dance to protect the vulnerable engines. It was a demanding, exhausting symphony of effort, each people playing their part in a coordinated ballet where a single misstep meant collapse. The very air grew thick with the strain, the cost felt in the wounded who were quickly pulled back behind the shifting lines. With a final, deafening groan that seemed to shake the foundations of the land, a fissure appeared in the great gate, then another, and then, with a shriek of sundered stone, the obsidian wall shattered inward, revealing not a victory, but a deeper darkness. They had won the gateway, but the silence that poured from the opening was more unsettling than any battle cry. The true challenge, the final and most personal confrontation, lay within that waiting void. The stillness within the fortress was a physical pressure, thick and cold. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence, a heavy quiet that seemed to swallow the very echoes of their footsteps. The air itself resisted them, a clinging gloom that sought to dim the light from Elian's sunstone, which now glowed like a lone star in an endless night. They moved as a single entity, a small band of champions navigating corridors that twisted back on themselves in impossible ways, where walls seemed to breathe and the floor shifted underfoot. Here, in the absolute dark, their hard-won trust was their only guide. A pressure plate clicked under Boren's heavy boot, and a section of the corridor ceiling, lined with sharp crystalline shards, began its slow descent. Before a word could be spoken, Lyra was in motion. Her form was a blur of gold and shadow as she darted forward, her eyes scanning the mechanism revealed in the wall. It was not brute force that was needed, but a delicate understanding of leverage and timing. With a precise strike from her dagger, she jammed the main gear, halting the ceiling with a shuddering groan mere inches from Boren's helm. He gave her a single, solemn nod, the gratitude silent but profound. Further in, their path was blocked by a wall of solidified shadow, a barrier that pulsed with a deep energy. Elven magic slid from its surface, and Lyra's blades could not find a purchase. Boren stepped forward, his great war hammer held in both hands. He did not simply swing. He planted his feet, called upon the deep, enduring strength of his people, and brought the hammer down in a blow that carried the weight of every stone in his mountain. The barrier did not crack. It shattered into 1,000 dissipating fragments, the force of the impact echoing down the hall. Each challenge was met not by a single hero, but by the immediate, unthinking application of their combined strengths. An elven warding spell shielded the group from a cloud of disorienting mist, while a dwarven knowledge of stonecraft detected a hidden pitfall. Every decision was made with the others in mind, every action taken to preserve the whole. With every obstacle passed and every guardian overcome, the bond between them grew stronger than any fortress wall. The path, as if sensing their unwavering unity, could no longer misdirect them. It began to slope downward, a deliberate and steep descent that pulled them deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, the oppressive silence giving way to a low, rhythmic hum that vibrated in their teeth. They were being drawn inexorably downward, toward the source of all the world's shadow, to the very heart of the blight itself. The throne room was not a room at all, but a cavernous void where the very concept of light seemed to fade. In its center, floating above a disk of polished obsidian, sat the Corruptor. It was not a beast of fang and claw, but a shifting, amorphous mirror, and when it turned its attention to them, they did not see a monster. They saw themselves. Elian saw his father, the late High King, his face etched with concern over a son who had left the woods to burn. Lyra saw the faces of the riders lost on the shale slopes, their eyes questioning the cost of her choices. Boren saw the sealed inner gate of Stone Peak, and the hands of his own people reaching for him from the other side before it closed for the last time. The air filled not with threats, but with their own most private, painful thoughts given voice. "You failed them," the whispers hissed, layered with their own vocal tones. Your pride cost them their lives. Your caution doomed your kingdom. You are alone. The psychological pressure was a heavy weight, pressing down on their shoulders, threatening to drive them to their knees. To fight it, they would have to do the one thing the darkness demanded they avoid. They had to speak their fears aloud to each other. My father's memory has followed me since I left the Silverwood, Lorian said, his voice strained but clear. I carry the fear that I have failed his legacy. Lyra's gaze, locked on the vision of her lost riders, did not waver. I gave the order that led to their final journey, she declared. That weight is mine to carry, and I carry it for them. Boren's voice was a low rumble of granite sorrow. I sealed my own kin behind a wall of stone to save the rest. There is no day that passes I do not see their faces. In speaking their deepest regrets, they did not give them power. They shared the burden. The moment the words were out, hanging in the air between them as a sacred confession, the mirror's hold broke. The twisted reflections flickered and dissolved. Their shared openness, their unwavering trust in each other's understanding, became a shield the lies could not penetrate. A cry of pure frustration, the sound of a fundamental truth being denied, tore from the corruptor. Its form wavered, its power visibly dimming. It had tried to break them with their own humanity, and in doing so, it had only proven that their unity was stronger than any single sorrow. The final confrontation was no longer a battle against a shadow, but a stand for the light they now embodied together. The twin moons began their slow, inexorable dance across the ashen sky, their edges touching in a celestial embrace that thinned the veil between all things. As the light shifted, the corruptor reacted. It did not roar or lash out. It simply expanded, becoming a vortex of absolute negation, a void that began to actively erase the light from the air around them, pulling the warmth from their skin and the hope from their hearts. It was not an attack to be blocked, but an ending to be endured. In that moment of terrifying clarity, Lorian understood the prophecy's true meaning. To undo a shadow born of the first dawn required a light of equal purity, a power that could not be wielded from a distance. It had to be channeled directly, its brilliance focused through a living spirit, and such a conduit would not survive the process. The cost was absolute. He stepped forward, the sunstone blazing in his hand, ready to make himself the final offering for their world. But before he could take a second step, a hand closed around his arm. It was Queen Lyra, her expression not of grief, but of fierce resolve. On his other side, King Boren placed a heavy, grounding hand on his shoulder, his gaze unwavering. The Sylvan elder simply stood before him, her presence a quiet, unshakable support. No words were needed. The decision was made in the space of a single breath. They would not let him carry this weight alone. They joined their wills, not in a circle of power, but in a line of shared purpose, each one offering their own spirit as a lens to magnify and guide the light. Lorian's starlit grace, Lyra's enduring spirit, Boren's mountain strength, and the Sylvan Elder's ancient life force. They did not combine, they became one. A single, searing lance of pure white hope erupted from their united front, a beam of creation itself that pierced the expanding void. It was not a clash of forces, but an act of profound restoration. Where the light touched, the shadow simply ceased to be, unwritten from existence. The cost was felt by all, a shared, draining exhaustion that reached into the core of their being. Yet as the last of the darkness dissolved, leaving only the gentle, untainted light of the aligned moons shining down upon them. The four leaders remained standing, their shared commitment having forged a new dawn, not just for the world, but for the very meaning of friendship itself. The light did not simply defeat the shadow, it transformed it. The blinding dawn, born from their unity, washed over the heart of shadow in a wave of absolute purity, a silent, searing brilliance that unmade the fortress stone by stone. The shrieking obsidian towers did not fall, they dissolved into motes of harmless light, like morning frost, yielding to the sun. The ground beneath their feet lost its bitter chill, warming as if after a long winter, and the oppressive silence was replaced by the first, tentative sounds of a world waking up, a gentle wind sighing through the now open air. They stood together, exhausted but unbroken, as the last remnants of the corruption faded into memory, yet the profound quiet that followed was not the silence of peace, but of a question hanging in the air. They had won, but what had they released in the winning? A gentle, golden light began to pulse from the center of the vast, empty space where the corruptor had been. It coalesced into a single, perfect seed, resting upon the earth, its surface shimmering with the same intertwined energies they had used to create it. This was not a weapon or a treasure. It was a promise, the world's first new beginning, born directly from their final, selfless act. The seed represented a future they had earned, a legacy of unity waiting to be planted. But as they looked at each other, their faces etched with the toll of their shared journey, they knew the path ahead was not over. The return home would be a different kind of test, a walk back through a world forever changed, carrying with them the weight of this fragile, radiant hope. The first true dawn in years broke over the land, not with a fanfare, but with a gentle, persistent light that painted the sky in soft hues of rose and gold. A profound silence settled around the four champions as they stood on the newly cleansed earth, the last echoes of the collapsing fortress fading into memory. The air itself felt different, lighter, carrying the clean scent of rain on warm stone and the distant, hopeful song of a bird that had not been heard in an age. In that quiet moment, the immense weight of their journey settled upon them, not as a burden, but as a shared understanding. They carried with them the memory of those who had not completed the journey, a quiet and respectful presence in their hearts. Yet here they stood, alive in a world they had fought to save, their bond forged in the fires of war, now tempered into something as strong and enduring as the foundations of the world. The long road home stretched out before them, a path no longer shadowed by fear, but illuminated by the simple, profound hope of a tomorrow they had earned together. The journey home was a walk through a world reborn, where the Shadow Vale's blight had once choked the land. Tender green shoots now pushed through the soil, and the air hummed with the return of bees and birdsong. The path itself seemed softer underfoot, as if the earth was grateful for their return. This was not a march of soldiers, but a procession of one people, a living tapestry woven from elf, human, dwarf, and Sylvan, their armor glinting not for war, but in the gentle light of a sun they had fought to reclaim. The leaders did not ride at the front. They walked among their people, their presence a quiet anchor in the sea of shared memory. A dwarven soldier would fall into step beside an elven archer, and a story would begin, a tale of a comrade's bravery, or a moment of kindness in the depths of the Deadlands. They spoke the names of those who had completed the journey in a different way. their memories carried not as a weight of sorrow, but as a guiding light. One evening, as the campfires were lit, a human rider stood and began to sing a slow, haunting melody from the plains of Eloria, a song of remembrance. One by one, others joined. An elf added a harmony that spoke of starlit groves. A dwarf beat a slow, respectful rhythm on a shield, and a sylvan voice wove through it all like a whispering wind through leaves. It was a song that belonged to no single people, but to all of them, a shared lament that honored every life given. This act of walking together, of sharing stories and songs across the old divides, did more than mark the end of a war. It built a new foundation for the ages, a legacy written not in stone or treaty, but in the quiet, unbreakable bonds between those who had faced the long dark and returned, forever changed to the light. The silver wood no longer whispered of ancient sorrows, but hummed with the sounds of a new beginning, where ancient trees formed a protective canopy. A clearing now bloomed with purposeful activity, the air filled with the scent of fresh sawdust and clean stone. This was the birthplace of Eloria, a city conceived not from one vision, but from four. High King Elian walked the marked foundations not as a solitary ruler, but alongside Queen Lyra, King Boren, and the Sylvan Elder, their presence a constant reminder that this was a shared endeavor. The city's central plaza was being laid out in the elegant, flowing patterns of elven design, yet the stone itself was dwarven granite, quarried from Stone Peak and fitted with such precision that not a sliver of light could pass between the blocks. Human architects, masters of creating warm, welcoming spaces, designed the great halls and homes, ensuring they fostered community and connection. And weaving through it all, the Sylvan folk guided the living aspects, encouraging swift growing, flowering vines to embrace archways and directing gentle streams to flow through public gardens, their magic ensuring the city would breathe with the forest itself. Every citizen, whether elf, human, dwarf, or sylvan, found a role that honored their unique strengths. Dwarven masons taught their craft to human apprentices, while elven lore keepers worked with sylvan growers to create libraries open to the air, where knowledge and nature grew side by side. This was more than construction. It was a daily, living lesson in cooperation. The very act of building together, of seeing a wall rise from the combined effort of many hands, wove the piece they had forged directly into the city's foundations. And at the heart of the rising structures, a site was reserved for the shared council hall, a permanent home for their leadership, its four wings facing the cardinal directions as an enduring symbol that their future would now be decided together, under one roof. The day the Heartstone was set was a day of quiet, profound significance. The great plaza of Eloria lay open to the sky, the new white stone still carrying the fresh scent of the mountain and the forest. At its center, a massive, flawless crystal waited, humming with a gentle light that seemed to pulse in time with the heartbeat of the gathered crowd. It was not a throne or a monument to any one ruler, but a focal point, a symbol of the shared life they now protected. One by one, the four leaders stepped forward, but they did not face their own people. They turned to each other. Elian was the first to speak, his voice clear and carrying on the still air. I swear, not to a crown or a kingdom, but to the bond we have forged. My strength is yours, and the light of my people will forever be entwined with yours. Lyra followed, her gaze sweeping across the faces of dwarves and elves, and Sylvan folk alike. "I pledge my spirit to this union," she declared, "not as a queen to her subjects, but as a sister to her family. Our fates are now one fate." Boren's oath was a low rumble, as solid as the stone under their feet. "I give my word," he stated, his hand resting on the Heartstone. "My axe and my honor are sworn to this alliance. Our forges will burn for you, as yours for us." The Sylvan elder placed a hand upon the crystal, and her voice was the whisper of leaves and the trickle of a clear stream. "We pledge the memory of the roots and the promise of the growing things," she said. "This light will be guarded by all that lives." Then, something remarkable happened. It was not just the leaders who swore the oath. A captain of the Lorian Cavalry stepped forward, placing her hand over her heart and speaking the words. A master dwarf smith, his beard still flecked with stone dust from the new construction, did the same. An elven singer and a Sylvan scout, a human farmer and a dwarven miner, they all came. There were no grand titles used, only names and the simple, powerful promise to protect the light they had won together. This was the true founding of the last alliance, a commitment woven not from the top down, but from the heart outward, a promise that would echo through the ages as a guardian of the world. The new council met for the first time in a sun-drenched grove, its circular space defined by ancient, gentle trees. There was no head to the table, no throne to command attention, only a ring of simple stone seats, placed with intention on the soft moss. High King Aloud, Queen Lyra, and King Boren sat not as monarchs presiding, but as equals in the circle, their postures relaxed and open. The air itself seemed to listen as the first order of business began, a discussion on how to fairly distribute skilled crafters to the regions still rebuilding. Voices rose and fell, a human planner speaking of road networks, a dwarven engineer detailing quarry output, a Sylvan grower explaining soil renewal. Every opinion was heard without interruption, the conversation a living stream that flowed around the circle until a clear, shared direction emerged on its own. This was governance by consensus, a patient and profound respect for the wisdom inherent in every voice. Then came the moment that would define the alliance for centuries to come. When the topic turned to long-term security and trade routes, Aloud did not offer his own strategy. Instead, he gestured to a younger elf commander, renowned for her innovative tactics. Lyra yielded the floor to one of her own sharp-minded diplomats. Boren, in his gruff way, called upon a bright-eyed dwarf who had redesigned their forge bellows for greater efficiency. One by one, the founders stepped back, creating space at the circle's heart for a new generation of leaders to step forward. They were not retiring, but becoming guides and mentors, trusting that the future they had worked for was safest in the hands of those who would live fully within it. This conscious passing of responsibility was the Alliance's greatest act of faith. It ensured their hard-won peace would not be a relic frozen in time, but a living, breathing entity, capable of growing, adapting, and facing whatever new challenges the turning ages might bring. The council adjourned as the stars began to appear, the grove emptying of people, but filled with a new and powerful quiet, the promise of a legacy that was already putting down its own deep and enduring roots. The storyteller's voice was as warm and steady as the hearth fire around which the children gathered. On this quiet evening in Eloria, the little ones were a mixed assembly, with Dwarven toddlers sitting patiently beside elven youngsters and human brothers, sharing a blanket with a curious Sylvan child. The elder, a woman whose eyes held the memory of both deep feeling and great joy, did not begin with the creeping uncertainty of the Shadow Vale. She began with a choice. She told them of a king who chose to listen to a memory of friendship when it would have been easier to close his gates. She spoke of a queen who chose to ride a challenging path to save those she had just begun to call allies. Her story was not one of epic battles and world-shaking magic, but of the small, brave moments of trust that built a bridge strong enough to hold the weight of the world. She described the cleverness of an elf king solving a puzzle in a dwarven hall, and the selflessness of a captain offering her own light to calm a troubled forest spirit. In her telling, the great conflict was a tapestry woven from countless threads of individual courage, each one essential, each one a lesson in what it means to care for something beyond oneself. The children's eyes grew wide not with fear, but with wonder, seeing themselves in the tales of those who chose to be brave, to be kind, to be steadfast. This gentle narrative, repeated on countless peaceful evenings, became the true heart of the Alliance's legacy. It ensured that the next generation would not remember the past with dread, but would carry forward its deepest truth, that the most powerful magic in any world is the simple, enduring choice to stand together. The first autumn in Eloria arrived not with a chill, but with a warmth that seemed to rise from the very foundations of the city itself. The air in the great plaza was thick with the mingling scents of fresh-baked dwarven journey bread, sweet elven honey wine, and the rich spiced stews from the Lorian hearths, creating a symphony of aromas that promised community and comfort. This was the first harvest festival, and it was more than a celebration of the season. It was a living, breathing display of the beautiful tapestry they had woven together. No single culture dominated the space. Instead, they flowed into one another like the colors of a sunset. Over by the new fountain, Dwarven master smiths held open forge demonstrations, their hammers beating a steady, joyful rhythm against glowing metal as they shaped not weapons, but intricate tools and beautiful decorative pieces, explaining each step to wide-eyed elven and human children. Nearby, the swift Lorian horses, their coats brushed to a shine, were the center of friendly races that took them on a circuit through the city's new, tree-lined boulevards, their hooves a cheerful thunder that made the Sylvan folk smile. As twilight deepened and the stars emerged, the Heartstone in the plaza's center began to glow with a soft, inviting light. It was then that the elven starlight dances began, graceful movements that wove patterns of silver light in the air, a visual story of constellations and hope. And weaving through it all was the sound of the Sylvan harmony choirs, their voices not singing words, but the very essence of the forest, the whisper of leaves and the chuckle of streams, a sound that settled over the entire festival like a gentle, unifying blanket. Here, a dwarf could be seen attempting an elven dance step to the encouragement of his human friends. There, a Sylvan elder shared the story of a particular harvest fruit with a group of rapt Lorian riders. Every citizen, from the oldest founder to the youngest child, had a role, a taste, a moment of shared wonder. This was the peace they had earned, not a quiet and solemn thing, but a vibrant, joyful, and deeply lived experience, a promise that the world they saved was worth every effort, and that its greatest treasure was this shared joy, found in the simple, profound act of celebrating life together. The air in the Silverwood carried the crisp, clean scent of a changing season, the same scent that had greeted King Elian on a deeply challenging morning many years before. He stood now at the forest's edge, the ancient horn cool and familiar in his hands, its silver surface worn smooth by time and touch. His daughter, Lyra, named for a courageous friend, stood before him, her posture reflecting the same quiet strength that had carried him through a difficult chapter. He did not speak of the horn's first, urgent call that had echoed through these very trees. He spoke of the stillness that followed, the trust that had answered it, and the peace they had all built with their own hands. "This instrument is not a summons to conflict," he said, his voice steady and warm. "It is a reminder of the bond that answers. It is a promise that we keep for each other." As he placed the horn into her waiting hands, the gesture was not one of stepping away, but of profound confidence. He was not giving up his role, he was expanding it, entrusting the future to the generation that had grown up within the light of the Alliance, for whom unity was not a hard-won ideal, but a lived reality. The light they had worked for was no longer a fragile flame to be guarded, but a lasting fire in the hearth of the world, and it was ready to be carried forward by new hands. The Alliance's legacy now traveled far beyond the borders of Eloria, carried not by armies, but by envoys. These guardians of the peace moved through the world like gentle rains after a long drought, their purpose no longer to confront shadows, but to nurture the light they found in others. When word reached the council of a territorial misunderstanding brewing between the river clans of the eastern deltas and the highland shepherds, their response was not a decree or a show of force. They sent a small delegation, a single elf skilled in listening, a dwarf who understood the language of land and water, and a human mediator trained in finding common ground. They did not arrive to judge, but to facilitate, to help both sides see their shared need for the same flowing water and the same sun-drenched pastures. The agreement that was eventually woven, one that respected seasonal grazing rights and protected the river's source, became a local legend, a story not of conquest, but of a wisdom that helped a community find its own way forward. This spirit of guardianship extended to the very land itself. In regions still marked by the old struggles, teams of Sylvan growers worked alongside Dwarven geometers and human engineers. Together, they did not simply plant new trees, they designed whole living systems. They used elven knowledge of ancient water songs to guide new streams, while Dwarven skill carved subtle, resilient terraces that prevented erosion and captured the rain. The humans, with their deep connection to cycles of growth and harvest, helped establish sustainable farms that would feed generations to come. It was a compassionate renewal of the earth, a patient process of reminding the soil how to be fertile and the winds how to carry clean scents again. Their greatest strength had become their boundless capacity to share it, to see a struggling community or a challenged landscape not as a problem, but as a future friend. The peace they guarded was a living, breathing entity, and its true measure was found in the quiet moments of exchange. A Dwarven master smith might spend a year in a human town, not to build fortifications, but to teach the art of crafting plowshares that never dulled and cooking pots that distributed heat perfectly. In return, a group of young Lorian riders would travel to the elven forests to learn the subtle skills of tracking and silent movement, not for war, but for understanding the delicate balance of a wild ecosystem. This free flow of knowledge and compassion became the Alliance's most powerful offering to the world. It transformed their own history of a great conflict into an even greater lesson, proving that the end of a battle can be the beginning of a purpose far more profound, a commitment to tend the garden of the world with gentle and capable hands. And so, under that canopy of intertwined silver and golden leaves, the story finds its quiet close. The elders' final words hang in the air like gentle moonbeams, and one by one, the children's eyelids grow heavy. Their breathing slows into the soft, steady rhythm of peaceful sleep, each young mind cradling its own vision of brave choices and steadfast friendship. In this shared slumber, there are no borders between them, no memory of the old divides that once defined their world. Their dreams are the true legacy of the last alliance, a living testament written not on stone, but in the quiet, trusting hearts of the next generation. This is the light that now burns steadily in the world's hearth, a flame that requires no guarding, for it is fed by a million small acts of kindness and understanding. It ensures that even the deepest night is filled with the soft, certain promise of dawn, a new day forever being built by those who choose to remember that we are all stronger together.